Hello, my name is Mark Watkins, and you're watching my Regis University Instructional Technology Capstone Portfolio presentation. Throughout this presentation, what I hope to do is share with you some of the things that I've learned throughout this program, as well as some of the ways that I've applied what I've learned to my classroom practice, and will hopefully elaborate on some of the ways that I hope to continue to progress as an educator and apply what I've learned throughout this program in the future. To begin, I'd like to reflect a little bit and share with you some of who I was before this program began, so that we might get a better idea as to how much I've grown as an educator. Prior to this program, I had about 5 years of experience teaching elementary in both the 6th and 5th grade. This really had nothing to do with my education in my undergraduate and then my teacher education at the University of Oklahoma, which was really focused more on secondary social studies education, history specifically, and so the road to become an elementary educator was full of twists and turns, as I guess most people's roads are. And having moved to Colorado and trying to kind of get my foot in the door as an educator, focusing in secondary social studies, I realized just how competitive the market really was, and how, coming from out of state and not really having contacts and not having a wealth of experience and an advanced degree, there was just very, very few opportunities. And so that first year that I lived here, I substituted throughout the Douglas County Public School District, a little bit in the Littleton School District, as well as Inglewood, and pretty quickly I realized that I should probably stick to one area. And Douglas County, being close to where I lived, and at the time was still and continues to be kind of a growing school district with a lot of young families and development, it seemed like the logical choice. And pretty soon I came to be requested at an elementary school, Roxborough Elementary School, which has since divided into 2 buildings, and kind of built a relationship with the people there, and was very lucky to work with many teachers at different grade levels, and kind of gain enough experience to realize that elementary education was not really what I thought it was. All my preconceived notions about it being a glorified daycare and constant battles with behavior management and solving childlike problems really was unfounded and really kind of irresponsible on my part. I realized pretty quickly that there was something very special about working with students that were a little bit younger and were kind of unspoiled and I guess unjaded about learning and about education, about, I guess, the role of a teacher and what they can do. And so that led me to accept a position at Roxborough Intermediate School, where I've continued to work since. So I'm now at the end of my 6th year at Roxborough, and it's really been a blessing and an honor and a privilege to work with such a great staff. As far as my motivation to pursue an advanced degree and then to seek out Regis and this program, again, a story that had a few twists and turns. I didn't really see myself as a great student in growing up, and was not a great student as an undergraduate, and my interest kind of was all over the place. So my motivation to get an advanced degree in education and to get into the instructional technology program through Regis specifically was, again, another chapter that was kind of full of some uncertainty and a little stretch of the road that certainly was not straight. Whenever I first began thinking about pursuing a graduate degree, I talked to some friends and colleagues who had gotten master's degrees in the past, and one of the things that kind of struck me in their conversations that I knew I wanted to avoid was that most of the teachers that I talked to who had gotten advanced degrees, many were in the area of early childhood literacy or different programs that might set them up for more of an administrative role in education. But what I was going to say is, one of the things that really struck me was these teachers didn't really feel like what they had gained in their master's program impacted them on the day to day, and they really hadn't changed their teaching practices a whole lot, and this could be due to a lot of reasons, and it's not necessarily just the choice of program. It might have been the period in their lives that they took this program, or perhaps it was that they had kind of backed it up to their undergraduate education without having gained experience before going back into academia. Um, and so I'm not too sure about that, but the one thing that I was sure about, the one thing that I knew after these conversations was if I was going to take the time and invest the money and and pursue an advanced degree, it was something that I wanted to be able to bring back to the classroom that I know for a fact was going to change the way and improve the way that I was teaching. And so looking at a lot of the different programs that are out there, and I certainly looked at schools outside of Regis, but I settled pretty quickly on the idea that, instructional technology seems like a way that I can make my teaching better. And what little I knew about the field, I guess, I figured, man, I'm going to get in there and, I'll learn a lot of new tools and maybe, figure out a way to take the tools that I already have and use them better. And so I guess my preconceived notion, if you will, was that, it would almost be like vocational in that kind of way. I guess I knew that there would be some research and some theory involved, but more I felt like I was probably just going to get in there and learn how to do some cool stuff with computers and get some kids to do some neat things with computers. And so it was a pretty naive and foggy understanding of what I was getting into. But I settled on Regis because it was a university here that was close to home, and they had different options as far as class structures and being full online or mixed or on campus, and so it offered some options, and it seemed like whenever I kind of read over some of the material about the instructional technology program, that there would be courses that would kind of help me pursue the things that I was interested in at the time as an educator, and trying to find ways to use technology in a more meaningful way. And so my expectations about the program, like I said, they were probably a bit naive and a bit gullible in a way about what graduate college is all about. And I was also kind of worried because I'd never taken a class online. Whenever I was in high school and even as an undergraduate in college, technology has just evolved so rapidly over the last 10, 15 years, and really taking courses online just really wasn't something that was available whenever I was an undergraduate. And so, having never done it, I really did not know what to expect. And my concern, I guess, was that I wouldn't have the camaraderie and that kind of shared experience with other students in the class, and that perhaps being a little bit detached from the instructor, that it would be difficult to get on the same page. And so, I had, I guess, a lot of worries and a fair amount of uncertainty about what it was that I was getting into, both as a graduate student in general and as a student who was going to be taking their entire program online. And so it was very much a leap of faith, and in some ways I kind of got pushed from the back by my wife, bless her heart, and I appreciate her for all that motivation to help get me going. But it was kind of some blind faith and a leap into the dark that got me into this program. And so, with that said, I'm gonna go on ahead and lead into a recount and a reflection of the journey that has been this instructional technology program. And I believe that I'll begin with just a quick overview of my Capstone portfolio website and a little bit of the ideas and some of the motivation that led me to design it the way that I designed it, and to include the artifacts and content that I chose to include. So, with no further ado, the the journey begins. So here we are at the homepage to my Capstone portfolio website, and it looks a little bit different, and hopefully it's not too over the top, too flashy. But as I was looking back at the start of the course at some of the examples that were given, there were certain things that I really liked about this particular example or that one. One of the things that I just decided very quickly was that I didn't want my Capstone portfolio site to look like anybody else's. And the theme that I had gone with way back in the very first class when we were asked to kind of set up the skeleton for our Capstone portfolio, which seems like ages ago, but that theme was um, it wasn't a self-hosted WordPress theme, which kind of limited some of the choices and limited some of the options as far as plugins go. And while it was certainly functional and wasn't, I guess, unappealing to the eye, I didn't really feel like there was anything unique about it, and I didn't really feel like there was anything that was altogether memorable about it from a visual standpoint. And so early on in this course, I decided that I needed to kind of start fresh with a self-hosted Capstone portfolio, and part of the idea was that I've come so far as a teacher and have learned so many great things that this is kind of this is going to be my big takeaway and be the thing that I can just point to and send a link and say this represents me and what I've learned throughout this program. And so to take the time to kind of set up a self-hosted and then browse the thousands of themes and test run, research hundreds of themes and then test run, 15 or 20 different themes to get an idea of how it would perform and what it would look like, was quite a bit of an investment in time. But now in looking back at it, it's one that I'm very happy that I made because again, I feel like I have something here that kind of represents who I am and where I am as an educator, and hopefully it's well, I realize it's a kind of a break from some of the examples that I'd seen. I hope that it meets all the requirements and perhaps provides another example that people can go by in the future. So anyways, with that said, you can kind of see here that in the theme I chose something that was a little bit more visual and a little bit more active. We've got a slider here that's has kind of instructional technology images, or I guess images that would kind of evoke that response of being high tech and being educative as well, and have kind of tried to splash up a few uh, eye-grabbing headlines with some brief descriptions that might help viewers kind of quickly, oh, I'm interested in that, and just click the image and take them to one of the pages in the program of study that would highlight an artifact that kind of goes along with the description provided. And so, with that said, I think one of the things that I was thinking as I was designing this was that uh, while the main audience is, of course, my fellow students and my professors, this is something that I want to be able to share with anybody, share with colleagues, share with my parents, share with my students, and so something that I was hoping would kind of be appealing to a wide range of different audiences. And so another thing that kind of attracted me about this particular theme was the widget area at the bottom that would allow you to kind of, again, extend that visual element throughout the presentation page, the home page. And again, the idea here being that without having to browse through menus and kind of sort through content, if you're interested in the headline, you can just kind of hover over and find out what this is all about, and then be directed to a different page
that would have content and artifacts geared toward what we saw on the presentation page. And so um, I felt like this was a bit of a risk at the start of the course, and it took quite a bit of time to settle in on a theme, and then again quite a bit of time to try to fine tune the settings and really um, find the images and find the right words to make it really look and function the way that I wanted it to. And so that's just a little bit about some of the thought process that went into this capstone portfolio from a design aspect. And with that said, I believe that I'm going to carry us through and move into working my way through what I've learned in this program, class by class, and I'll do that in a chronological order, even though my program of study I align just by course number in ascending order, just because I'm so hung up on structure and appearance, I guess. But so as we cruise through, we might be kind of bouncing around on this menu, but the presentation will take place in the order of the courses that led me from the start of this program up to its completion. And so, with that said, we'll move right along here and begin with the very first course that I took as a graduate student in the Instructional Technology program at Regis University. Pedagogical Practices in Instructional Technology was the first course that I took as a student at Regis, and like I said in the introduction, I didn't really know what to expect out of the program and from being an online student for the first time. And so I was pleased very early on with the entire experience, and found that I was getting quite a bit of learning from the online environment. And our attention turned to revisiting some of the theories and philosophies that obviously we'd learned about in our undergraduate education as becoming teachers. And so going back and looking at theories of behaviorism or constructivism and cognitivism, and kind of revisiting some of those theorists and philosophers that I'd learned about years ago um, was kind of a good place to start, and kind of got my reflection going and got me thinking about my practices, and and then obviously we started approaching it by investigating how technology kind of plays into these theories, and how theories and strategies can be made more effective by the use of technology. And so right from the outset, it seemed like I made a good choice in the program. Throughout EDTC 600, we covered many topics, like I said, about philosophies and theories, and one that really sticks out and has come up in every class and is obviously kind of a cornerstone of the program is the theory of TPAC and technological pedagogical content knowledge, and that kind of framework with which to approach knowledge and understanding, and how our teaching practice can be improved by approaching instruction with this framework in mind. So this framework, this TPAC framework, developed by Mishra and Kohler, is really based on work of prior educational theorists, and with some of the other models that I've seen, pedagogical knowledge and content knowledge were in the framework, but then they might be blending with a third, like curriculum knowledge, for example. And so Mishra and Kohler, their contribution, their great understanding, if you will, is that in the 21st century and our students today, technological knowledge seems to round out the framework a little bit more appropriately than curricular knowledge. And this framework allows us to take what we've already gained from a pedagogical and content knowledge standpoint, and work with technological knowledge to kind of enhance all aspects of those three elements. One of the important understandings that I gained through the research and trying to work with this framework was that it really depends a lot on the context that we're teaching within, and and that as we change content or we change our pedagogical strategies or we change the technology that we're trying to integrate with our instruction, any change in a single element thereby causes changes in the way that we're going to blend the other two elements. So really that meeting point that we have in the middle where we're working on technological, pedagogical content knowledge is really um, the aggregate, I guess you would say, for each of those individual elements and the way that they blend and balance themselves to try to find the most impactful approach that we can have as instructors. So this framework and coming into contact with it so early on in the program was a great benefit and allowed me a new lens to look through at my own practices and a lens with which to view the things that I was going to try to be doing throughout the program. Another one of the topics that really struck a chord with me during this course was the universal design for learning and the way that universal design principles could be applied in the classroom and should be applied in the classroom. And so this was a new take on a language for me that in my school culture is all about differentiation, and we hear differentiation all the time. And I think that the universal design for learning kind of what it brought to my understanding of differentiation was not that we just simply make sure we're presenting content in a variety of ways so that different styles of learners can access the content, or that we're providing appropriate content from a developmental perspective and making sure that students who may be working with different challenges have access to content knowledge that's not hampered by some kind of developmental delays, say in literacy. And on the other end of the spectrum as well, advanced students um, have different challenges and needs that they need to be met as well. And so for me, differentiation was always about kind of the delivery of content. And and I think that that's true for at least many of the people that I work with. And I think what they and I have been realizing is that differentiation goes much deeper than that. And the universal design for learning kind of drove that home for me. And so things that I've been trying to do as a teacher, having taken this course and gained this understanding, is more to focus on the strategic networks and the effective networks and ways that I can provide students with more opportunities to demonstrate how they have processed information and what their understanding of the content and what their applications for the content might be. And so simply providing students with more options that allow them to be creative and demonstrate what they've learned in a way that suits them best is something that I've been trying to do a bit more of. At the same time, and I think more challengingly, finding different ways to allow students to engage with the content is very important. And with state standards and Common Core kind of um, leading the way as far as what it is our students should be exposed to at what age, and trying to meet those obligations while honoring um, student choice and students to kind of pursue what their interests are and what motivates them to be learners is, I think, a delicate balance. In some areas, I find it to be a little bit easier than others when it comes to literacy instruction with reading and writing. I've found that, and technology has really helped me do this, have found that students are much more engaged and much more motivated when they're able to exercise that choice and pursue those personal interests that are meaningful to them. And so, again, universal design for learning and the research that I did was highly motivating and really has rounded out my understanding of what differentiation is and what it should be about. The strategies of Robert Marzano are something that came up throughout the program and were introduced very early on. And I wasn't really familiar with Marzano as much as an undergraduate as I was some of the material that we covered throughout this courses. But uh, it was nice to just have some strategies and learn about some of the evidence that support these strategies as just kind of an anchor, I guess, in my instructional practice and things that I knew that I needed to use more whenever I was planning my instruction and to make sure that I touched on each of them throughout the day. I found when reflecting on my instructional practice that some of these really came naturally to me and were things that just kind of happened organically throughout the day, while others needed a little bit more conscious effort and planning on my part to make sure that I incorporated them in my instruction. Some of those were cooperative learning. This is something that I think if you say my desire to have kind of organization and order in my classroom has kind of, at least early on, whenever I was just began teaching, a little bit more reluctant to open things up to truly cooperative learning environments. And I think that's just because sometimes, at this age as sixth grade students, it's a hard thing to balance. And really, I think the key is that it's effective learning and it's not just a chance for students to be social in the classroom. Now, certainly socializing is a part of learning, but for me, the difficult thing is to find that balance where we're attending to the tasks at hand and that we're dealing with the content that we need to be. And so that's one area that I've really had to try to focus on and consciously put effort into. Um, like I said, some of the other areas just kind of happen a little bit more naturally for me. Another one that has been big is setting objectives and providing feedback. Really more setting the objectives and letting students have a voice in what the goals and objectives need to be throughout a unit, throughout the course of the year. I think that technology offers all kinds of interesting possibilities and different ways that we can apply the strategies of Marzano. The way that students can express their understanding of things has been expanded and continues to expand with different technology applications. And so really, I think the way that we behave as individuals in society, the way that students behave as individuals in the classroom and in the world outside of the classroom has really been changed and transformed by technology. And so the way that we pursue and try to employ the strategies described by Marzano naturally take on and can take on different forms by using technology. And so that's something that I try to keep in the back of my mind now as I'm planning instruction and trying to think of different ways in which um, we can bring these strategies to the classroom and have technology kind of be an aid and an assistant in that process. Another of the topics that really interested me during this course was the issue of the digital divide, and my understanding of that really evolved throughout the research and throughout the course based on what I was learning. I'd also often thought, I think as many people do, of the digital divide and kind of see it in this way where it's a discussion of the haves and the have-nots and the access that people have to technology based on their socioeconomic standing or their geographical location and throughout the world, throughout the country, throughout cities, and really seeing it as a function of economics. And so, of course, there's much research about this, a great deal of research and a body of knowledge that's been gained through research. And the thing that I found more interesting was the way that a digital divide exists in our classrooms based on the ability of the instructors to effectively employ technology and to enhance the educational experience of students through the use of technology and the integration of technology. And so this was that second level of the digital divide that I really had not given much thought to before. And so immediately whenever the topic came up and the attention shifted to this second level of the digital divide, that it really piqued my interest and really had me looking around at what I saw in my own school building, and really how in this day and age for many of us, not to say that that first level digital divide doesn't exist, but in the United States, it seems that that gap has been closed considerably. Not that there's no work that can be done and no improvements to be made, but that really now the issue is that there's plenty of access, but instructors need to be able to take advantage of the access that they have, and really dig deeper and learn new and better ways to get more out of their students. I could see in my building, and even in comparing myself and to people who were much better at integrating technology, or even I guess a little bit more um, inexperienced than I was in that area. That even within a building where we have exact access to the exact same resources, there still exists a very different level of education, and a big reason for that is the disparity between teachers who really understand and know how to integrate that technology into that TPAC framework, whether they're doing it consciously or not, and those who really have no plan and have no thought or consideration to how they bring technology to the classroom. And so that's something that's always kind of stuck in the back of my mind over these last, 18, 20 months, and I think it's something that's going to continue to stick with me in the future. The artifacts that I included in my EDTC 600 portfolio page were first a behaviorism Prezi that was a collaborative effort between Rich Cole and myself. I'd love for you to view it, and you can access it through the link on that content page. To me, this behaviorism Prezi was really a jumping off point. This was the first time that I'd ever collaborated with another individual, um, without being just sitting next to them and talking out our ideas and jotting them down on paper, and taking notes in person. And so, as much as I'm proud of it for its communication of the theories of behaviorism, I'm also very excited about it, and look back at it as a starting point for the way that work was going to get done throughout this program. And I couldn't have asked for a better partner for the first time out. Rich was great and has continued to be great throughout the program. Um, Next, I've got my TCAP planning tool, and this is something that um, really tried to make it so that we could see the way that the learning theories and Marzano's instructional strategies and UDL guidelines, along with content standards and the ISTE standards, the NETS for students, and really just using it as a tool with which to evaluate the lessons that I was developing. And so also included is an example of a lesson that was designed kind of with the TPAC framework and that checklist in mind. And so love for you to check it out on the EDTC 600 page. Included also on the page, in addition to some reflection, and you can access those links, um, some of the standards that I believe these artifacts demonstrate. The bibliography that I've included in this and all pages reflects all the resources that I used for papers and projects throughout the program, so that's why they look so extensive. So by the end of my first course at Regis, I knew that I had made the right decision and that I'd picked a program that was really going to be beneficial to me and where I was as an educator, and was really looking forward to my second course, EDTC 601, Virtual Collaboration and Communication. And so I'll be talking about that next. Virtual Collaboration and Communication was a great course, and I felt like right from the beginning of the course, I was learning things that I was able to immediately apply in my classroom and bring to my team that I teach with. Some of the things that we covered that I immediately started to research more closely and bring to the classroom were blogs and wikis. Um, these are two tools that are now really kind of a staple in my teaching repertoire, and tools that I try to use and share with my students, and to really empower them and give them some Web 2.0 technologies that they can use to share what they know with a broad audience. We also talked a bit about web assessments, and one of the learning topics that really surprised me was online learning and what some of the options are as far as distance learning, not just at a post graduate or college level, but even in a K-12 environment. So those were all interesting topics to me. I was surprised about how interested I got in the topics that dealt with acceptable use policies and researching and finding out more about my district and my school and their policies. And I found it interesting that they did seem fairly antiquated. And so some of my work was then to collaborate with another student to develop an acceptable use policy that would work for uh, that kind of an age of student, where it was in that late elementary to middle school age student. We also developed a wiki on digital citizenship, and again, you can see all of these artifacts um, on my Capstone portfolio page. So I think as I talk here and reflect, we'll just take a little browse through the artifacts that I did include in the portfolio page. The acceptable use policy here was created with a wiki, and this was the first time that I'd used this technology. It's since been something that I've used more as a teacher and have exposed my students to and allowed them to use and create with wiki spaces. Um, and so throughout creating these policies, what I was thinking of is how can I kind of take these technologies and the topics that we're covering and then make them more powerful and put them to good use. And so something that I'm beginning to experiment with is allowing students to kind of come up in a collaborative process, the policies that are then going to guide some of the things that we do in class. And I've had this approach to behavior management in the classroom and classroom management in the past, just the idea that students kind of buy in more if they feel like they're um, consulted and active in that process of creating those kind of expectations and regulations, if you will. And so what I plan to do in the future then is to have students contribute these and share these on wikis that can then be linked to the classroom sites, and in that way there's their work up there, and it's them setting the expectation and defining and thinking about what is acceptable and what's responsible and safe whenever we work, not only in the classroom but also in the digital environments that we're using increasingly. You can kind of see here in this digital citizenship policy that I created with Veronica Ramig, another Regis student, that we took a route that was a little bit more kid friendly and something that might be an example of what students could come up with on their own, more kid friendly language. And as you can see, we're trying to get our point across by using some visuals and providing some other resources so that kids um, can try to access it in a few different ways, and at least keep them on the page for a few minutes. Um, and so again, I think this shows how valuable a collaboration tool Wikispaces can be, and how it can help support a positive, safe, and respectful community inside the classroom, and as well as those digital environments and those virtual environments that we find ourselves interacting and learning in from time to time. Another way that I applied what I was learning in the the course EDTC 601 was how I could use technology tools to help collaborate with my colleagues. And as we were transitioning to becoming an IB school and working with new planners, there's quite a steep learning curve, and they're all built on sound principles of backward design and understanding by design, but organizing them and kind of working within the constructs that they provided is basically just documents. Seemed like kind of an inefficient way to plan in the 21st century. And so one of the things that I realized is that using websites to help collaborate between colleagues in the planning department was something that could be very valuable. So here's an example of a unit plan that's all housed on a website, and you can kind of see it's not just for the teachers, but something that parents and students can enjoy as well, and is kind of just like a home base. Um, and so it's accessible to everybody, and it just kind of outlines what the plan might be and different aspects of the plan. And of course, these are all using IB language, but again, a way to kind of communicate information to students and parents. It's a great way to organize resources, which you can see here. We have different kinds of resources that are kind of catered to different learning styles, and they're all in one place, and they're all accessible by everybody. All the teachers get to contribute to them and help them evolve and kind of put their stamp on it as well. And it's something that's worked very well and has kind of become the way that we like to do things as a team. You can see here another example of this idea in practice with a unit that's more based on space exploration and was built on the idea of getting the students to plan the colonization effort of another planet. Again, the same basic model here where we can communicate elements of the plan um, for both the students and the parents, and then we have a place to kind of consult these particular parts of the plan that's so important to IB. As you can see here, we can share a calendar of the unit as well as assignments. So if students are away, student gets sick, they can access everything and know what it is that they should be working on at any given time. We have, again, of course, many resources gathered, things that we know are appropriate for the age of our students and that we know are reliable and come from good sources. In this site, we also were able to build in a link to the students who created a wiki page as their summative assessment. So as you can see, each group of students got to plan and then communicate their efforts to colonize another planet. They got to share their information in writing, which is great, as well as drawings and videos. And so, again, kids had a great chance to explore new technology and collaborate in a way that was fresh and new and interesting to them using Wikispaces. As usual, you can access these artifacts through the content page underneath Program of Study, EDTC 601 in this case. Links are at the top of the page, as well as some thumbnails that you can access the sites from as well. Included is my reflection on these artifacts and the standards that I believe that they represent and apply toward. What 21st century skills I believe that were employed to make them and students employ whenever they're using them, as well as my reflection on research that was conducted throughout the course. The bibliography also states the references that were cited throughout all research and projects during the course. Thank you for viewing this portion of my Capstone portfolio project. Integrating technology into curriculum was a very fun class, and it really was a time whenever I could start to see that I was researching areas that would be more geared toward a leadership role in schools as opposed to just strictly a classroom teacher. Issues like technology budget, reviewing our school and district's policies with technology integration and adoption. And so asking those questions and doing that bit of field research around my own school was very enlightening, just to get a kind of behind the scenes look of everything that goes into from a hardware standpoint and just the nuts and bolts of getting the tools into the hands of the instructors and the students, what kind of goes on from a budgetary standpoint and a policy standpoint. At the same time, I felt like I was taking on a different kind of a leadership role by bringing many of the tools that I had learned about early on in the very first two classes and putting them in the hands of my students as a way for them to share their understanding. So the artifacts that I selected for this page of the Capstone portfolio are both student projects. They were both summative assessments that were designed with technology integration in mind. The first is a solar system wiki, in which the students were tasked with designing a mission to colonize another planet, or in one group of students' case, the moon of another planet. And the Iceland volcano site is the effort of two students who are attempting to predict a natural disaster, and then research and develop technologies and plans to help assist in minimizing the damage. And so again, two ways I felt like that I was integrating technology and getting the tools into the hands of the students, who were then turning out amazing collaborative projects that required multiple forms of media and a depth of understanding. So with that said, I think we'll just quickly tour the artifacts and then move on. Thank you. So as I said, this wiki here was developed as a joint effort where students were grouped into groups of 3 and perhaps 4 in some cases. They were then randomly assigned a planet with the idea that they needed to come up with a mission to colonize that planet. And the mission had to include some specific benchmarks, I guess you would say, so certain requirements that students had to think about and kind of develop their ideas and then communicate those ideas in writing. And then they were allowed and given the opportunity to also express some of their thinking in other medium, and many used videos and did video presentations that were then put on their group's page. And then others did some other things, some presentations, drawings, and things of that nature. And so as we look here, you can just kind of see that we have a home page. One of the things as I browse through here that I'd like to talk about is how I thought it was neat, and the students also thought that it was great, that not only were students collaborating within a group to tackle these problems that were put in front of them, but they were also really collaborating as a whole class, because everybody's work was going to be showcased online and be viewable by a very wide audience, and because everybody's content was going to be contributing to the quality of the site as a whole, there was very much a sense of classroom community, I believe, that was developed through this project as well. As you can see here, there's a considerable amount of research and communication here about what exactly the mission hopes to accomplish, also identifying what challenges there would be in the effort. They then kind of turn their focus to how would they then overcome those challenges. So many students try to come up with solutions to traveling deeper into space and traveling faster in space, and storing supplies, away from where they're produced. And so there's many things questions that come up throughout one of these projects that get students to be thinking creatively and exercising critical thinking. Um, and so it was really a great success, and you can kind of see and feel free to browse in more detail. Again, this is an artifact that's linked back on the portfolio page for integrating technology into the curriculum. This website here is another example of how I was trying to bring what I was learning in EDTC 614 back to the classroom. This site was created by 2 students, and students were tasked, like I said, with predicting a natural disaster, being very location specific, and then researching, the causes for that would lead them to believe that their event was fairly likely to happen in the future. Um, Students then were able to kind of defend those predictions by building up the content of their website, and as you can see, they do it here in writing, and they reference some visual literacy as far as the map is concerned and the relative movement of the plates. But like I said, basically explain why it is that they believe this event can happen and probably will happen at a given place. They then research some of the technology that's currently available and in use with detecting and then communicating information related to seismic activity. They try to think of ways to improve upon those technologies or invent altogether new technologies. And it's very interesting to see what they come up with whenever they're really given a task where the sky is the limit, and their imagination, as long as they can explain their thinking and defend it and be and express some reason in their thinking, then the more creative, the better, and it's something that I've been pleased with. Next, the students go through and build a proposal, come up with some kind of a solution, and then their favorite part is then turning and covering um, the event as though it were actually happening. And so students, you can see, get to work in front of a green screen and come up with scripts, do some streaming audio replications of communicating news about a disaster. This is, again, I believe, a very good example of how technology can be integrated into instruction, and especially how valuable it can be whenever you are putting it in the hands of the students and asking them to use the technology to communicate their understanding about the content. As usual, you can browse these artifacts in greater detail by going to the EDTC 614 Integrating Technology into Curriculum page underneath the Program of Study in my Capstone portfolio. In addition to the artifacts that I previewed, you'll see a little bit more of a detailed reflection about how that whole process went, as well as other things that I learned throughout the class. You'll see the standards that I believe these artifacts embody and represent, as well as the 21st century skills that I believe apply. You'll also see reflection about some lessons learned throughout research, which I thought was very interesting. A little write-up about generational issues and technology integration, and some other good stuff as well. As usual, the bibliography includes all sources that were used throughout the course for research papers as well as presentations. Thank you for watching this portion of my Capstone portfolio presentation. The instructional design course really couldn't have come for me at a better time. Our school is currently going through a transition into becoming an IB school, the first elementary school in our feeder area that's seeking that IB accreditation. And one of the components of the International Baccalaureate program is, of course, they use the principles of backward design. And so getting a chance to learn a little bit more about backward design through this course while developing plans with my colleagues and team members at school was a great opportunity to kind of double dip and get a little bit of extra experience to go along with my education. And so the main project for this course, which makes up the body of these artifacts on the content page, was to design an instructional unit. And as I recall, you could choose between an instructional unit that you would then deliver and execute in the classroom, or you could go the route of trying to design a professional development experience. And so that was something that I'd never really considered before this program started. And even at this time, a few classes down, it was something that was still seemed a little bit daunting and kind of out of reach. But at the same time, it would seem like a challenge and seem like something that might be interesting. And especially because I really did feel like I was learning so much throughout the first three courses that I wanted to share with my colleagues in kind of a little bit more of a formal way than just sitting over the table in the teacher's lounge at lunch and what have you. So the artifacts that are included in this page again make up the body of that plan from the very first ideas and context mapping and theories of actions, right from the goals and all the way through lesson planning and creating the materials that were used. And for me, the real payoff was to actually conduct a couple of classes for small groups of teachers, but just to get a chance to share that knowledge and share some resources that I had developed and a skill and an idea that I really believed in, I thought was a great opportunity and something that I certainly wouldn't have done had I not been pushed by this program. And so I might browse briefly and leave it to you to browse in more detail the artifacts that are included here. And with that, we'll probably begin, I suppose, with our progress tracking tool. So one of the components to this plan that I thought was going to be one of the more difficult to pull off was the progress tracking tool and the idea of actually assessing the audience, because normally what that means is I'm looking back at 25 or 30 kids, and in this case I was going to be looking around at a room of my colleagues, and the idea, I guess, of quizzing them or testing them made me a little bit nervous, I guess. I didn't want to come across the wrong way, but at the same time, the idea of tracking the progress and being able to get feedback about how the audience is learning is obviously a very important part of the instructional process. And so if you care to read in greater detail, you can access this from the content page. However, just briefly, the whole idea was to try to be as non-intrusive, I guess, as I could be, and still while gathering some data. And so in addition to kind of circulating the room and getting some discussion and feedback verbally during the instructional process, I also wanted to come up with a way to have some kind of raw data that I could look at later, just some direct private feedback from individuals that were in the audience. And so to do that, I just designed a Google form that I could then share with the audience. And it just kind of, what I like about it is it's anonymous. They're not required to tell me who they are, so hopefully they can be honest about how useful they thought it was. Questions just about the process and how they felt and what their experience was like. And so at the same time, it's nice to have that data just kind of gathered and organized for you automatically by taking advantage of the technology. So this was something that I believed was a challenge during the process that I overcame by using technology. Another thing that I was very proud of throughout this process was that I was able to come up with some materials and create some materials that would help the audience, especially after the time in class was over. And so what I did essentially was created a digital document that I could share with the audience as a PDF and make it so that it was linked to voice thread audio that accompanied what they would be seeing in the PDF and the steps that would be going over in the PDF. And so that was something that I felt like made perfect sense and was something that the audience would really appreciate and know that in the back of their mind while instruction was happening that they wouldn't have to be, you know, worried about missing something and then not being able to get back and kind of recall and retrieve that information whenever they needed it. And so, like I said, I conducted this professional development and got some really positive feedback. And to me, like I said, I believe in my written reflection, one of the great ahas for me was that when a teacher who really had previously no experience with technology and, you know, kind of a nervousness and apprehension, maybe even a fear, if you will, of using technology, came to my course and took it twice. And then now I see him and he's using the things that we covered in that course and creating his own sites and is loving every minute of it. And so again, this was an example of a professional development that was based on instructional design principles that were learned in EDTC 602. Of course, you can see these artifacts and others linked in the EDTC 602 page that's underneath Program of Study in my Capstone portfolio, along with a little bit more reflection and some different takes on what it was like to engage in this process and do something new and something that was a challenge. I've also included the NETS standards that I believe apply and are represented by these artifacts and the 21st century skills that were in play as well. There's some reflection about the research that was done throughout this process, as well as a bibliography that uses and shares all of the resources that were used during this course. So I think the great thing about EDT 602 is that I really took the opportunity to see myself as a leader in technology and somebody who could not just use technology and integrate it into my instruction for 12-year-olds, but actually design and execute courses that were designed for adults and designed for educators and designed to make educators more aware of how they can use technology to help them accomplish a great many things. And so really, in addition to, like I said, learning more about backward design and understanding by design while applying it in the classroom and with my team and working out these new IB units, I'm glad that I took the opportunity to take a project and push in a different direction and something that gave me a great sense of satisfaction, and I was kind of surprised about how much I enjoyed the process and then enjoyed delivering that instruction to my colleagues. And so those were the main lessons learned and achievements, I guess, if you want to call them that I experienced in EDTC 602, Instructional Design. Thanks again for viewing this portion of my Capstone portfolio presentation project, and I'll be thinking about web development and talking about that in the next couple of sections. Thank you. I was so excited for web development for educational use whenever I saw it in the program that would be taken in this instructional technology master's program. And web development is one of those things that's really interested me, I think, for a long time. And in all my experience that I had prior to this course was with a system that was provided by the district. It's called School Center, and it's a very basic web development program, and you get very basic results and very, now that I know a little bit more about what is out there and what different platforms are capable of, School Center was a very cumbersome tool and really is kind of discouraging, I feel like, for educators to use, but that was kind of the standard at my school and what virtually every teacher at my school uses. And so I was curious about this one from the start, and so whenever the course got going, I was excited to see that while we were going to be learning about different things and covering different topics that were specific to web development, theories and principles of design, and so much of the research was fascinating about how viewers engage with a page and interact visually with the page, and indicators of how you can design a web page to function and appear the way that you want it to, and in a way that's good for the audience. So I was thoroughly excited about it, and what I was going to say is that I was really excited that we were going to be able to create these things, create some artifacts that we could apply and use in our practice, and so not just learning some principles, but then we're actually applying them, and left to choose the ways in which we were going to apply them. And so I came up with a few examples that I have linked here, some artifacts on the Web Development for Educational Use page under the Program of Study. And the first, Watkins Class Rocks, that's my classroom website that was created using Google Sites. And this signaled a big departure for me, and going in a new way from what the school had previously kind of provided for us. And then the second, the Connected Classroom Learning site, is an example of my first WordPress site, and it's a business site for educational technology, instructional technology, integration, consulting business. And so I think we'll take just a brief tour of those sites and talk a little bit about how I created those and how I feel they represent my learning throughout this program. So you're looking here at my classroom page that I set up and use currently at my job at Roxborough Intermediate School. And as I said in the introduction, this was a big departure and kind of a leap, and put myself out there to do something different from other people, and then create an example by which I could hopefully teach other people and spread some of my ideas. Again, this motivation kind of came from how cumbersome and just unintuitive and difficult to use the School Center application was for designing a website. I'd tinkered around with Google Sites before in other classes, and decided to kind of pursue it a little bit further and see what kind of customization options I could actually get from this free open source software. And so you can see here I've got custom graphics in the header, and custom fonts that I feel like appeal to my target audience, which is mainly my students. Of course, I want parents and colleagues to access this site as well, but my theory, I guess, that I was running on here was that I wanted my classroom site to become more of a place where students go to engage with instruction and to educate themselves outside of the classroom. And so most of the design choices were then made with the students in mind. And so as you can see here, like I said, custom header up top. Learned how to use Google Presentations to create a slider in Google Sites. As you can see here, some custom graphics that relate specifically to our school and our community. And these images are linked to different places on the site, or different websites entirely. Included an about page so that kids could get to know a little bit more about me, and again, designing this thing, well, about our class, I should say. It's not all about me, and then a little bit more about me and my family and what we like to do. And with that said, the rest of it, like I said, is really all about the students. And so whenever I say that I want them to be able to engage with instruction, for example, I'm trying to come up with ways to give students and parents access to information and access to instruction, and have it all located in one place, so that they're not out there searching and trying to stumble their way onto something good on the internet. They know that they can come to this website, this classroom website, and get instruction that has to do with exactly what's happening in class on those given days. So accessing math lessons, for example, coming up with VoiceThread and linking different media and other resources that kids can get at and kind of get that refresher from home sometimes that they might need. So again, this site was really about trying to take a fresh approach, I guess, to my classroom website. And with that said, I think we'll preview the connected classroom learning site, which again was revolutionary in a way for me personally, just because again I tried to push myself in a direction that I hadn't thought of priorly. So we'll go on ahead and take a little bit of a closer look at that as well. So as I said, this website really for me was another experiment and another way that I was trying to push myself and explore new directions with what I was doing. And so initially, like I said back at the beginning, whenever I got into this master's program, I really didn't know what to expect. I knew that I wanted to become a better teacher and that integrating technology would be something that I could do to help me achieve that goal. But I was really not sure about any kind of other directions that it would lead. And so whenever we were presented with this challenge, and I was looking at creating my first self-hosted site using WordPress, I decided to do something that would be completely out of the classroom but still education related. And so as I, in my mind, kind of explored ideas about possibly professions related to education that may exist outside of the classroom, this is one idea that came to mind, and basically providing services, being a consultant to schools, being a consultant to educators, and trying to provide some of the knowledge and insight that I've gained throughout this program as a professional development specialist. And so a little bit about the site. As you can see, I've kind of tried to go with a real clean and viewer-friendly design here, something that looks professional and is kind of business oriented, custom name and custom logo in the header, as you can see, and then as you might expect, a business site to perform, links to pages that describe the services that can be provided, portfolio pages, a little bit more about me. And so this was a very interesting process, and I realized pretty early just how many more capabilities and possibilities there were by using a self-hosted website with WordPress, because there were so many more themes that were available. There were so many more options as far as plugins go, and so it really showed me early on that this was something that for someone who really likes graphic design and kind of arranging things in ways that I feel like make sense and are appealing to the eye, this seemed like a platform that I'd be more interested in using in the future. And of course I've done that here with my Capstone portfolio website as well. And so without spending too much time, please feel free to browse Connected Classroom Learning. You can find it at watkinsconnect.com, or of course linked in the artifacts section of EDTC 603, Web Development for Educational Use. So I don't think I really could have been more happy with this course and what I learned and how I was able to apply what I learned throughout the course. Again, as usual, you can find links to these artifacts, and I please do encourage you to browse them in a bit more detail. They're linked here on the EDTC 603 Web Development for Educational Use page, as well as some written reflection that kind of explores a little deeper and from a few different angles what I shared with in this presentation. So again, you can click the links above or the thumbnails, and they'll both get you to the artifacts. I've included the NETS standards that I feel are exhibited in these two artifacts, as well as the 21st century skills that I believe apply. I've also reflected on some of the research and things that I found were really interesting throughout this course, and so please feel free to browse those. And as usual, bibliography includes all of the sources that were used for research and projects throughout this course. So after taking web development for educational use and enjoying it so much and feeling like I had created such interesting and useful products, I was really excited to take advanced web development. I was a little bit scared because I'm not a coder and I never want to be a coder, and so the limited amount of HTML that we learned was hopefully going to get me through the next course, and I was pleased to find the instructor was very flexible and cooperative and interested in where we wanted to see our learning go and things that we wanted to see achieved by applying what it was that we were learning. And so for me, my mind immediately went back to the classroom and ways in which I could expand and find new ideas and new ways to design websites and try to get some interaction with the students and help them learn in a Web 2.0 environment. So I'd had a little bit of experience with blogging through the School Center platform, and it was very tedious and soon became unmanageable. And so working with a self-hosted WordPress theme, I decided to jump back into blogging with both feet and created a blog site that I'm very proud of and that my students are very proud of. And it's been an interesting journey bringing it to the classroom and then sharing it with my students and allowing them to kind of take more and more of a leadership role in it throughout the year. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that and kind of go over, highlight some of the features that I think are interesting and work well with that artifact. And so we'll go on ahead and take a closer look at that now. So again, the idea here with the Watkins class blog was to bring a Web 2.0 technology into my classroom. And of course, a Web 2.0 technology is one of those that turns the power to create and post content to the internet over to the user. And so bringing this to a group of sixth graders was something that I thought about and had actually experimented with a little bit before, but never really on this kind of scale and with the power that these tools were kind of bringing. And so from the outset, whenever I was kind of thinking about my target audience and what it was that I wanted this blog to do, I knew I wanted it to be interesting visually and kind of have that look of an online magazine, something that was very colorful and young and fresh with clean lines, but definitely something that was graphically driven by the images and the arrangement of them. And so I found this theme here that I felt like met all those needs and had a nice kind of clean look, but then the posts would then take on kind of this mosaic, and based on the way that you categorize your posts and have different settings for categories, you get this interesting color scheme so that orange goes with sports and purple goes with literature, and it's kind of broken up according to category, and then you can see the featured image and then link to the post through the image or through the title there. And so my idea here again was to create this blog with the idea that it would be a place to showcase our writing, and that many different genres of writing could be addressed through these different categories. And so you can see here I tried to stick with categories that I thought might generate some interest. We have the screen category where students are encouraged to talk about their favorite films or shows or video games, things that they engage with the screen. And again, trying to tap into this in multiple genres, so descriptive writing or explanation or even possibly persuading somebody to watch this film and providing reasons and explanation of why they should. The weekend category is all about those things, those diversions that we have over the weekend and things we like to do with our free time that are a little bit more active than maybe the screen section. So these things would include going skiing or going for a bike ride, a jog in the park, or going to a theater performance, perhaps, if that didn't fit in the screen. Literature naturally is about the things that we like to read, and so this is one of the students' favorite categories. They get to share their thoughts and their feelings about so many of the books that are popular with them right now. Music, we get to share our ideas and our descriptions of our favorite musicians. We get to recount and write about memories past whenever we've had good experiences with music. Sports, of course, is one of the top topics. Especially in my class, it seems like so many kids are engaged in sports and are athletic, and to finally get to choose the way in which they engage with writing and fit it into these categories, and all of a sudden it's not like, oh man, I have to compare and contrast these two things. It's like, oh, I get to compare and contrast American football to Australian rules football or any other example such as that. And so really, and of course, news is pretty self-explanatory. But what I was going to say is that really, to me, this site and what it does for writing instruction is really honor that universal design for learning principle of offering students a way to engage in different ways. So if we're talking about researching, we're talking about writing, it's really left up to them what the content is going to be, and we can focus on our instruction on the skills that make for good genre-specific writing. And kids can be passionate and be knowledgeable and be excited about what it is they're writing because they've been able to choose the subject of it. So whenever I first began this project and introduced it to the kids, I would draft posts, things that were interesting to me that fit into these different categories, and then would ask the kids to respond through commenting on the posts. And so it was kind of a way to get to introduce students to just the process of commenting on other people's posts and kind of sharing their thoughts about things that were related to the post. As students were able to understand what their role and responsibility in this Web 2.0 environment would be, and as they kind of demonstrated their skills and their ability to meet the expectations and practice digital citizenships, their settings were adjusted to give them more power to create and generate their own posts and content that they were interested in. And so, as you can see here, what we have is a post by a student that was kind of a review of one of the books that she was reading here. And again, then students are encouraged to add comments and kind of provide their feedback on what it is that they had read and engaged with. The feedback that I've gotten from the students about the blog and feedback that I've gotten from parents and colleagues as well have all been very positive, and I think the main thing that's attractive about it again is that what we're doing is putting technology tools in the hands of the students and then allowing them to find ways to create and ways to communicate the things that interest them and the things that they know and share their skills. And just to highlight a few of the other appearance features that I tried to include here to hook the kiddos was each category has a page, and we have a little custom slider here, and this is where kids get to kind of preview what it is that different posts are about, and it's kind of an interesting and visually appealing way for the kids to kind of interact with the site. And of course, these link to the posts, and it'll take the viewer right there. Again, like I said, it's all based on categories and it's all based on genre writing, and so you can browse strictly by category, even posts that don't make it on the slider that's on the page. So as you can see here, we're in the literature category, and you can see a lot of the different posts that have been drafted. So I guess in sum, I believe that this artifact really demonstrates not only my abilities as a web designer, but I think more importantly, my ability to harness technology and my knowledge of technological tools, as well as my content and pedagogical knowledge, and really create something that's new and something that's engaging for the students, and is something that really can be handed over to the students to create and construct their understanding in a virtual environment with their peers. For a bit more reflection in written form and a few more different thoughts about this course and this project, please see my content page, EDTC 604, Advanced Web Development, under the Program of Studies tab. Included also, of course, are standards that I believe are exhibited here. Standards I believe are in evidence, both the ISTE standards and 21st century skills that I think are present. There's a bit of reflection on research as well. This has to do with all aspects of web development, and the included bibliography features all of the sources that were used throughout the course for both research and projects. Thank you very much for viewing this portion of my Capstone portfolio presentation project. EDFD 641 was the first elective that I took in this program, and as the way the schedule would shake out, there were no electives available in the instructional technology department. By this point, I was so into what I was doing in instructional technology and so excited about the courses I was taking that initially I was a bit disappointed and frustrated that I couldn't take multimedia followed by advanced multimedia and pretty much just stick to the program and continue to pick off courses in instructional technology. But whenever I started looking around at what some of the alternatives were outside of instructional technology, one that caught my eye very early on was children's and adolescent literature. And teaching sixth grade, I oftentimes feel like I'm kind of servicing those students that are in that transition between being children and becoming young adults. And so I'm always looking for new ways to incorporate literature into my instruction, and being the grade level that I'm at and having readers with diverse abilities and talents and levels of development, I feel like it's important to have a wide range of exposure to different genres of literature and literature that kind of caters to a wide variety of audience with regards to age. And so, with that said, once class really got going and I could see how many texts we were going to be looking at and how we were kind of breaking things down by genre and then developing lessons and units that incorporated literature as one of the key components for the content and to help develop skills, not just in literacy, but also across different disciplines. I became a little bit more enthusiastic about it. And the big project, the kind of ongoing continual project throughout this course, was to design a book database, something to kind of house information and notes about some of the books that we were reading and trying to incorporate into some of our lesson planning. And that is the artifact that I've linked here on this content page, and it's a link to my children's literature database, which I believe was a good example of my leadership and the way that I was applying some of the ideas and concepts that I was learning in instructional technology to a course that was in a department outside of instructional technology. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about how I feel like my project stacked up and was a little bit different approach, but an approach that I feel like has a lot of value and is a pretty powerful tool. So with that, we'll just kind of take a little bit of a closer look at the children's literature database. So what you see here is my elementary book database that I created, and as you can see, I created it using a Google spreadsheet. with hyperlinked text in the instructional resources column. Now, most of the students that were in this course with me, EDFD 641, immediately went to Microsoft Excel as their platform of choice, and I almost did the same thing, and then I got to thinking to myself, this is certainly a good way to organize information and can be a good way to present information, and obviously a lot of the search functions in Microsoft Excel work great. And so from just a sheer just the capability of the program to handle it and do what you would want it to do seemed to make a lot of sense. But I was thinking to myself that really the power that comes with a database is that everybody has access to it, or everybody that you want to have access to it should be able to have access to it remotely. And one of the other ideas that I really tried to employ here was the idea of making this database not only available for every colleague to view, but to make it available for every colleague to be able to contribute to. And so as you can see here, with the Google spreadsheet, what we're able to do then is share with an entire staff and set the entire staff's settings so that they can edit the document and thereby add to the document. And so this collection, on my own, I got over 50 resources, 50 different texts that are different forms of literature designed for young readers. And they're kind of organized, as you can see, just a little number, a title of the text and the author, the genre, the grade level, and I explain in some of the example lessons that the grade level is kind of what I saw as being the median grade level, if you will. So books that are listed at a level 2 can in many ways be appropriate down to kindergarten or up to 4th grade, depending on how an instructor was trying to use it and what kind of content they were trying to support with the use of that literature. What I think is really neat about my book database, in addition to it being able to be added onto and edited by colleagues, so that the database can grow more rapidly and be drawing from a larger body of knowledge that's represented by all the colleagues at a school. The other thing that I think is really neat about it is that in the instructional resources column, you can see that we have hyperlinked text that would then take us to example lessons. And so what some of those might look like, for example, Lom Po Po is a Red Riding Hood story from China. It's a folktale, an adaptation of the Red Riding Hood story that we're probably more familiar with. And so these documents kind of can give you a little brief summary of what the book is about, give you some ideas about how to tie it into different curriculum areas, as well as some questions that would fit into different areas of Bloom's taxonomy. And then finally, just an idea or two about how to incorporate this book into a lesson. So in this case, we might be doing some kind of comparative study between this adaptation of the story and the others, or we might be trying to quickly summarize and practice different skills involved with reading comprehension. Another example of a text that I thought was great was The Turkey Girl, and that was a Zuni Native American adaptation of the classic Cinderella story. And you can kind of read into this a lot about Zuni culture and the culture of other Native American groups based on the way that the Cinderella folktale was kind of tweaked and adapted to kind of fit the values of that society. So again, some curricular areas that could be tied into, as well as some Bloom's taxonomy questions and lesson ideas. Now, again, what I think is so neat about not only the database, the spreadsheet, but these documents as well, is that by continually opening them up to an entire staff and making them available for additions and revisions, as somebody uses them and maybe comes up with some other ideas or takes one idea and tweaks it a little bit and finds that there's some success, they can immediately add what they've gained from it right back into the document. And so what you end up with then is really a free platform that's allowing all the members of a learning community to collaborate and share their knowledge and gain from one another and contribute and and share those resources and share those ideas and that knowledge. And so that's really what I'm so proud of about this book database. It was the only one that took this approach, and I think that that had to do with having so many courses in instructional technology, kind of pushing me to find a way to take one idea and make it better and blend technology with what's going on in these other areas. So I was very excited about my experience outside of the instructional technology department, and children's and adolescent literature was a great course for me to apply some of the ideas and theories that I'd been learning to a new situation and come up with a product that I was very proud of, and I'm going to be happy to share in the future. Back on the EDFD 641 content page underneath the program of study, you can find some further reflection about that process and the other things that I learned throughout this course, in addition to creating the book database and that network of interlinked and interwoven documents. You can also read here what standards I believe are met by this artifact, as well as the 21st century skills that I believe are on display. I've added reflection about the research that was done throughout this course, and found that it was very rewarding to come back and take a look at the way that literature can be adapted to help support not only literacy instruction but content instruction in disciplines like science or social studies as well. Even found folk tales that help teach math concepts about exponential growth. So it was an amazing adventure, and getting back into our school library and kind of exploring it in depth for the first time was also something that I enjoyed. As usual, this bibliography represents all the sources that were used throughout the course for any research papers as well as projects. And I thank you for watching this portion of my Capstone portfolio presentation. EDFD 620, the Exceptional Student in Regular Classroom, was my second elective in this program and the second consecutive course that I took outside of the Instructional Technology department. The premise of this course was to investigate and build a greater amount of knowledge and skills associated with how we can best provide for the education of a diverse group of students in a regular classroom setting. And so more specifically, what we were talking about was the special conditions and exceptionalities that some individuals have to deal with, and the challenge and perhaps disabilities that impair them and can make learning in a regular classroom environment frustrating or difficult. And so then naturally the goal and objective of the course was to identify those ways in which we can better accommodate and modify our instruction so that we can be inclusive and give every student a chance at a world-class education in the least restrictive environment. The ongoing project in this course, and the one that I'm most proud of, was the Exceptional Student Database. I thought it interesting that in the second consecutive class, the idea of a database is kind of being the, I guess you'd say, the little keystone project of the course was interesting, and I just had a great deal of success creating my elementary book database that I was ready to apply that same technique to this assignment. Now, the difference was that the database that we created in this course was a group effort, and so was collaborating with two other students on this project. And again, and I credit this to being a part of the instructional technology program. Again, I came up with the idea of using a Google spreadsheet and that was an idea that was unique to our group. Other groups were using either Excel spreadsheets or just Word documents, and they came up with some great products and certainly had great depth of research and information and a very clear and well-developed understanding of the content. I think that the one of the goals that was driving me and leading our group in this way was that, again, the idea that a database is really one of those things that needs to be very user-friendly and very quick and easy to access, and something that can be shared in a professional learning community. And so, with that said, we'll take a little bit of a closer look at our exceptional student spreadsheet, and we can probably see why I think it's such a valuable and useful and efficient way to share information, and how using this technology can allow teachers to support one another and grow from participating in a collaborative effort with one another. So we'll take a little closer look and see some of the features that we came up with for this artifact. What we see here is the reference chart, that exceptional student chart and database that was created throughout the EDF D620 program. Now, what you'll notice here again is that we've used a Google spreadsheet, so that again, we're using a free and open source software, and one that is great for real-time collaboration and can easily be shared with an entire staff. It can be added to, settings can be adjusted so that different people can add to and refine and kind of help this database evolve and become more useful, fill it with more strategies and more techniques, more assistive technologies, and more resources to help teachers in their quest to provide a quality education for all learners, regardless of the conditions that may impact them on a day-to-day basis. And so, as we see here, what we've done is kind of gathered some basic information. The idea for me, the thing that brings value to this database to me, and in my opinion makes it a little bit more usable than some of the other models that I saw, is that it's concise, it's easy to use, it's quick, and it's self-explanatory. So what we've done here is used some simple colors to kind of break up some of the text and make it a little bit more easy to look at. You can see that we've anchored the top bar so we always know what it is that we're talking about. As much as we could, we tried to hyperlink in the reference section, which you can kind of see down here at the bottom, and then that way we have immediate access to websites and organizations that specialize in education for students with exceptionalities. Down across the bottom, we can see that we have sheets for different kinds of conditions and perhaps disabilities that might impact the way that our students learn and the modalities that suit them best. And so, as you can imagine here, as we kind of scroll over very quickly, quite a bit of research and quite a bit of collaboration as a group goes into creating this database. Now, in my mind, as it gets open to an entire staff, what you would then see is more people contributing to it, so it gets bigger faster with less effort by any single individual. And there again, I think that's something that's very valuable at a school and a professional learning community, is to be able to share ideas and watch them grow as a group. And so those are some of the basic features and ideas that kind of led me to this format and trying to gather and collect and communicate the information in this way. Again, I felt like being in the instructional technology program put me in a leadership role whenever approaching a project like this. It just made perfect sense to try to use technology in order to bring a staff closer together and to help support one another by using a platform that allows for easy communication and collaboration, easy sharing, and of knowledge and skills. So that was the basic idea and the premise behind this database, and I believe that it was well achieved with a great deal of help from my partners, and their contributions are greatly appreciated. Of course, I'd love for you to take a closer look at that artifact, which is linked on the EDTC 620 Exceptional Child Regular Classroom page under the Program of Study in the main menu. In addition to a link to the artifact, there's more reflection in written form about the process that I underwent to conceive and create this database, as well as some other things that were learned throughout the course. As always, I've included the standards that I believe are met by this artifact, as well as the 21st century skills that I believe are present in its creation and in its continual evolution. Additionally, I've reflected on some of the research that was done throughout the course, research into specific disabilities and how best to accommodate and provide a quality education for all students in a least restrictive environment. The bibliography, of course, contains all sources for research papers and projects alike. And as always, I thank you for viewing this portion of my Capstone portfolio presentation. So after having been out of the instructional technology department for 16 to 18 weeks, it was time to get back in for EDTC 605 multimedia. And this was a course that I was looking forward to and had been planning on taking a little bit earlier. And so after a little bit of time away to kind of apply some of the things that I've been learning in some different areas while gaining some knowledge and understanding and skills in those different areas, it was time to get back and kind of focus more on a technology integration type course. And so multimedia certainly delivered in that regard. And there were many things that I took away from it. And at the same time, I felt like, as the program was kind of coming to a close, that I was able to really refine my thinking and come to find comfort in a lot of the understanding that I'd gained in the last 18 months or so. And so for this page, I've included several artifacts. The first of which is the multimedia final presentation. In a lot of ways, it kind of serves the same purpose as this portfolio, only more specifically to the learning that I gained in a multimedia course. And so it's set up as a website that then has video reflection as well as written reflection and some images that go along to support the things that I was learning and applying throughout that course. We'll take a brief look at it, and then I'll leave it to you to look in more detail if you care to do so. So you can kind of see here the approach that I took to this assignment, which was, again, to kind of recap everything that we'd learned throughout EDTC 605. And so I'd set up this home page and then divided it up into different learning topics so that as you want to kind of go through and see what was covered in a certain topic and what I took away from a topic, what you're left with then is a brief written reflection about some of the different things that were covered, as well as a little video reflection, kind of like the one that we're seeing here. So again, it's broken down week by week, and so there's no need to obviously go into great detail and covering them all in this recap, but I would draw attention to week 8 because that kind of leads into my other artifacts, and some of the learning that was going on during this topic was about mobile media and how to use cell phones in education and try to leverage this personal electronic devices and the technologies, the handheld technologies that kids more and more are bringing to school on a daily basis. And so this was something that's a little bit touchy for me as a 6th grade student, teacher. I find that a lot of my students, there's many that have phones, many that don't. And so um, here I reflect on the development of a lesson that I'm pretty proud of, that I've included as an artifact in my Capstone portfolio. And so that is the idea of using cell phones in support of a field trip by creating a virtual museum, or a virtual tour, if you will, of what students are seeing on a field trip. So let's go on ahead and take a closer look at that lesson plan briefly, and then just kind of run through how that example works. So what you see here is simply a copy of lesson plan that I drew up to try to explain some of the standards and the objectives, resources and materials, and basically all the planning that would go into conducting this lesson. So here again, we followed the template that's been provided by Regis University, and it's broken up into different sections, and you can see here that we draw on some of those Marzano instructional strategies, and really it's a lesson that I'm excited about because it really addresses a need that I see, and really came out of an experience that had happened only about a week before I began work on this assignment. So the idea behind this lesson is to try to get students to engage more whenever they're on a field trip. And as I said, this idea kind of stemmed from some frustration that had been felt because of our approach as teachers to trying to get students to kind of engage and be aware and make a field trip a learning type experience. So we'd gone to the Museum of Nature and Science. We'd armed each student with a nice thick pack of questions that we had about different parts of the exhibits, and what I found quickly was that there were several types of students. One type of student really treats it as a scavenger hunt, is kind of running from one exhibit to the next, and one artifact to the next to try to answer the questions, and they've kind of got their head down, and their pencils are flying across the page, and their noses are down in the page, and they're not really taking the time to see and appreciate and really, gaze at these wonders that we have here on display. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, the student who, intentionally forgets his packet and is bummed out that you remembered to bring extra copies in case kids lost theirs, and then whenever they get it, they pretty much just ignore it as they wander about kind of aimlessly and without a great deal of purpose, and maybe they see something that catches their eyes and they stop and look at it, but again, not really thinking too deeply about what it is that they're seeing. And then there's certainly kids in the middle, but my question was, here we are in this wonderful place, and we've taken the time to get out of school to come see some of these amazing exhibits and artifacts, and what is it that we can do to help kids get engaged and feel like they're on a mission to learn while they're at this museum. And so as soon as I started doing some of the research associated with learning topic 8 in this course, and using cell phones as a way to help motivate and improve instruction, the idea struck me that most phones these days come armed with cameras, and many of them come armed with voice memo and video, and how neat it would be, I thought, to let the students use this technology to kind of gather information, visual information about what it was that they were seeing, with the idea that they could then come back and return to school, and in a free open source platform like Google Apps, do a Google drawing whereby they try to create a virtual representation, an interactive map, if you will, of the museum. And so in addition to gathering up those images, then we have the idea of making these drawings and linking some of the shapes and linking some of the text to the images that students actually took while on exhibit. And the idea here would be that students would work in a small group to help draw and sketch out floor plans of of the different rooms in the exhibit. Students would be jotting down some notes and taking notes on paper or through voice memo about what some of the artifacts were and what their significance was to Mayan culture. And what I like most about it is, as I kind of will click through here, I'll continue to describe what it is I like. One of the things that I liked about this idea was that we'd be putting students on a mission, but also putting students on a mission where they're not only collaborating with their small group to try to gather images and information, but also then collaborate class-wide or even grade-wide to create the mass of documents that it would take to provide someone who didn't have the opportunity to view this exhibit the experience of really seeing what it was all about and learn from it and be able to kind of share in some of that, some of the visuals that you can kind of only get by being there firsthand. And so again, more and more I found myself throughout this program trying to find ways to not just get kids to collaborate and communicate in small groups, but to get them to do it in as a whole class, and if possible even as an entire grade. And so I think it would take that kind of wealth of resources in order to build this network of linked drawings and linked documents. And as you can kind of see here, we work from room to room using arrows linked at the bottom of the pages to get us from drawing to drawing. And then within each room, we're trying to map out what it is that we are seeing there. And so students get a chance to do a little bit more research and kind of add to these documents. More students can add pictures, different angles, or maybe some different information that they gathered from being at the museum. And you can kind of see how in really just in this kind of collaborative way, we can really take field trips and get them from being a run through the museum and snap a few pictures while you're trying to fill out worksheets to something where students actually get to create and be creative and communicate and collaborate with one another and think critically about how they're going to provide a user who wasn't able to be there as good of an experience as they possibly can. So again, these are the artifacts that you can see here linked at the top of the page under EDTC 605 Multimedia underneath the Program of Study tab on the main menu. Please feel free again to take a closer look at these artifacts and think of ways that you can use them in your own practice. Accompanied here is again a written reflection as well as some thumbnails that will link you to those artifacts. The NETS standards that I believe are exhibited in these artifacts, as well as the 21st century skills that I believe are present. There's of course some reflection about the research that was done throughout this course, and some of the things that I found were very interesting, especially those things that had to do with open source software, for example, was a research topic that was very inspiring and kind of, again, in some way led me to the idea of whole grade collaboration on a virtual field trip, just the idea of opening up documents and ideas and sharing them with one another. Of course, bibliography here includes all sources that were used in research papers and projects throughout the course. And I thank you for viewing. So the final course, the Instructional Technology Capstone EDTC 610, is naturally full of reflection. And as far as artifacts go, that's what we've been looking at, this portfolio presentation, as well as the artifacts and the reflection that are contained within the portfolio. It's been a massive undertaking and one that I probably could have made easier throughout the program, but one that I'm proud of nonetheless, and one that I think is a good demonstration of where I'm at as an educator and where I'm heading as an educator. It's been a wonderful program, and one that I knew from the beginning would benefit me and impact my instruction, and it did that from the beginning. And sitting here now, only days away from the end of this journey, it seems so long ago, but at the same time, it seems like it's gone so fast, and I think that's because each topic and each class has been so engaging and so useful and so applicable to making me a better instructor. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I know it's been lengthy, but I feel like there's so much learning that I wanted to share and reflect on. So with that said, best wishes to you in the future, and perhaps our paths will cross once again. Thank you very much. This is Mark Watkins for Regis University Instructional Technology, Capstone, spring of 2014. Good night.